what's up? This is Udolena from Udolena Digital, and today is a book day. We're talking about Mastery by Robert Greene. This is Udolena from Udolena Digital, and today is my book review day. So today I'm talking about a book called Mastery by Robert Greene. If you haven't seen my video on 48 Powers of Law by Robert Greene, the same writer, you can watch it here. The book that I'm talking about is called Mastery, so it's about how do you become a master. It is estimated that you need more than 10,000 hours into a certain vocation before you call yourself a master, before you are at the level that you can perform on a really very high professional level. So this applies to sports, to arts, to literature, sales, business, anything that you think of, marketing. And to a big extent, I can associate with some of the things that I've went through in my life from this book. Robert Greene has also other books. The characteristic of his book is that he keeps adding a lot of examples from famous people throughout history. It might seem a little bit Machiavellian, so a little bit teaching you how to manipulate, how to be devil's advocate. However, I would disagree with this in a way. What he brings into these books is really depending on how you read the examples and how you apply them to your own life and to your own aspirations. So chapter number 1 is finding your calling. So he talks about the fact that we all have some kind of calling which is unique and specific to each one of us. And before actually going on a journey to mastery, because this can be a very long journey, we have to be sure that we are in the right vocation. We are going into the direction where we have a life task. Most famous people and most successful examples from the book have had always a sense of destiny, and this has helped them to persevere and to continue through hardship, through difficulties, rejection, and to essentially accomplish what they've done. So it might be the case that we all have a destiny. It's those of us that kind of keep this sense of a destiny are the ones who make it and fulfill their life's purpose. So he talks about Mozart, for example, about Charles Darwin, about Marie Curie, that from childhood they had something, they knew something that attracted them a lot. It might have attracted them for the wrong reasons, but essentially they discovered that there was something that they had very strong affection to. In the case of Mozart, he was first attracted to music because, little known fact, his sister was a musician. So he had an older sister who was also a miracle child, a prodigy child. She was already going on concerts, performing music, composing music as well. Even there are letters of Mozart talking about how highly he praised her music compositions. Nothing has survived. But anyway, he was very jealous of that. He was a very small boy, maybe 5-6-year-old, and he really wanted to be like his sister. So it was just competing with his sister for attention. Became more successful than her and became the bread earner of the family, which put a lot of pressures on him and ended up to him rebelling against his father, Leopold Mozart. But the whole idea is about that he had this calling from a very early age, and this calling turned from something that he wanted because of jealousy, like a clear childish jealousy, into something that turned into his profession because he realized that it was much more than that. Part 2, you're not gonna like this one, apprenticeship. In the past, if you wanted to be a master, let's say you wanted to become a master in making baskets or making pottery or blacksmith, they would typically give you, usually you would be a boy, they give you to the master at the age of 10-12-year-old, and you stay with them, like you live in their shop, in their workshop for 6-7 years. This sounds like a lot of time and doing something very, very young, but it actually has proven effective and really, really productive for people who couldn't first of all for the master, because they couldn't find anyone to hire. They had an apprentice, someone to help them. And second, for the apprentice themselves, because they had the opportunity to learn everything from experience. So he talks about the fact in nowadays people graduate from university, let's say in 23, 24. This is not an apprentice. The apprenticeship starts after you graduate university and you enter the workforce, because this is the actual real life experience that you're getting. So for us, this will be like 7 years. So like, let's say in your early 30s, this is the time when you're just starting to emerge out of your apprenticeship. This will be kind of the equivalent in nowadays, which can sound really tragic to a lot of people who are keen to demonstrate success, or kind of are told that in university that they're the best and they have to have really strategic power and take decisions. The truth is that you have to be learning. And when you come into new environment, even if you had been the master somewhere and you enter a completely new company, new workplace, new function, maybe you change from individual to a manager, you are back in apprenticeship mode. And it might take you another 7 years until you get there. And this is about the time that you need in order to get these 10,000 hours that are so important for you to be a master. So you have to make sure that you're not getting frustrated in the beginning. When you are just starting out, you have to observe. You have to understand how things are done. So when I started at Google, they told us, well, you're new here, but make sure that you don't do that much the first 6 months. Like, it was a bit of a shock, like how I'm not going to do anything the first 6 months. Like, I'm hired to work here. But they said that no, this is the time for you to observe, to understand how we work here. Of course, you will do what you're asked to do, the tasks, even though they seem manual, but you will have to understand really the complexity of this place. And this is a really truth now. I understand how complex and how difficult it is to actually make any impact if you have zero knowledge of the environment. Second part of the apprenticeship is actually getting the skills. So if you don't have the skills, luckily I bring some skills from before, so I can kind of transfer my skills. But let's say in some cases I have to bring new skills, so learn new languages, new things, learn about technologies that I didn't know about. So this is getting your skills right. And in the past, apprentices had to work really hard on their skills. They were getting beaten by the master. They had to practice and practice and practice, and there was not much time to practice. You had to actually produce work that was going for sale because material was really costly. So this is the second part, when you get your skills. So you should not get frustrated that you're not getting the immediate results. This is the time where you have to learn actually how to do things. And the final part is experimenting. So once you learn, you should not dwell on your skills. You should start experimenting and being bolder. And he talks a lot about the fact that in this point, some apprentices might actually get the wrath of their master and get kicked out of the workshop. You might get fired, you might get the anger of someone, and it might be the time for you to move on to something new. Just because you have been too much in the comfort zone, so it's time for you to get to the next place. Working with a mentor. Working with a mentor is highly underestimated, and I can say that mentorship is very difficult to find a good mentor. It's very difficult to attract and to have a good relationship with a mentor, but when the student is ready, the mentor comes and shows up. Finding someone who can help you to navigate, someone who can teach you, someone who can kind of give you ideas what you should be doing in order to get where they are. Just because they have the experience, you kind of get in a crash course by them, like in what you want to actually achieve. This is why you have to pick a mentor, someone who is exactly what you want to be in the future. If your mentor is someone who is doing great, but this is not what you want to be, then it's not a good idea and probably it's not the right mentor for you. Here's a great example which I really liked about Michael Faraday, the famous scientist, who was born in a very poor London family. He basically had no formal education. He was just like this poor street boy. And he ended up one day in a bookshop. So bookshops were a rarity at that time. That was the 18th century London. And he had a conversation with the owner, and the owner was really impressed by him. So he kept coming and coming there, talking with the owner, and at some point the owner took him as an apprentice in the bookshop, where Michael Faraday was allowed to read, and it was difficult to get your hands on books at that time, and he was kind of in the center of knowledge. Like, he had suddenly access to tremendous amount of information which nobody else, very, very few people had. Only the rich and powerful, and not even them had such a great library as that bookshop. And also the bookshop owner was introducing Michael Faraday. When he started working on scientific problems, he introduced him to scientists of that day. He was well connected. So he became not only his mentor, but his sponsor. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, the sponsor is the one who can actually open doors and advocate for you. The mentor is the one who is teaching you. But it could be that your mentor becomes your sponsor in some cases. See people for what they are and having social intelligence. This is one that actually can make it or break it for you. And this is something that I found the hard way. Sometimes when you know that you're right, you really want to make a point, but you're not using the right tools. You're just being stubborn. You're objecting to the wrong person. You are saying you're wrong instead of trying to actually win them. You get everybody else against you. It doesn't matter whether you are right. You're gonna lose anyway. So you should not underestimate the power of social intelligence and the power of being able to collaborate with people and to convince with your ideas. There's one really tragic example in here about Semmelweis. He was a doctor, a Hungarian doctor in the 19th century, and he was the person who actually realized that diseases like childbirth fever, which a lot of women after giving birth in that hospital he was working at, they were dying, and nobody knew why they were dying. He was able to make the connection that this comes from the dirty hands of the doctors, because at that time doctors didn't know that they have to wash their hands. They didn't know about microorganisms. So he actually came with a really great idea that could have saved the lives of thousands and thousands of people, and it's like no-brainer nowadays, but at that time it was a killer. They were literally killing their patients. And it was very difficult for the other doctors to understand this idea. He didn't put a lot of effort to convince them. He made enemies with the head of the hospital. He made enemies with other powerful people from the medical industry. And essentially he ended up penniless. His idea didn't pick up for much longer. And a lot more people died just because he wasn't able to actually get people behind him. He was able to get people against him, but not able to get people behind him. Awakening your dimensional mind, or the creative mind, the creative active. When you start your apprentice, you're full of new ideas. You want to change the things, but nobody allows you because you have zero experience and you're probably going to screw up everything. But it takes some time to get to the place where you can actually do the decisions. So by the time you get there, you have been told so many times what you should be doing. You have had to do these tedious entry-level jobs. You have had so many bosses that were telling you what is done and how things should be done. Essentially, your creativity is gone. So you have to actually awaken your creativity again when you get into that position in life. And this is something that I can relate to as well, because I'm just feeling that I'm just getting out of my apprenticeship in life at the moment. And this is now a time when it's very important for me to be creative, and I have to find ways to actually activate this part of me which was gone for a long time. So becoming bold after the apprenticeship, because it's very easy that you become comfortable. Once you learn your skills, you stop experimenting, you stop challenging things, and actually you become stale. One example here is Leonardo da Vinci. So at that time, for an artist to be successful, they had to produce a lot of artwork very quickly, and they had to produce artwork that satisfied the official taste of the time. There was some trends like in fashion today, so there is nothing new. But Leonardo wasn't okay with that. He really wanted to work meticulously on his works, and he really wanted to actually have meaningful and thoughtful works and deeply conceptually mature works. So actually, if you're familiar with Leonardo da Vinci's art, he has maybe 10-15 paintings that have actually survived. There's so few. And the reason for it is because he only painted very few. And the time when people discovered, there was recently a discovery of one of his paintings, the Christ, and that was a sensation in the art world because there's just so few paintings that he has done. And the reason why he did that is because he really wanted to make very, very meticulous works. He was working very, very carefully. Sometimes he would take a lot of time, like a real master. He was actually not influenced by the trends of the day, and this is how he became what he is. This is why he's Leonardo, and so many other artists of that time, we don't know their names. Finally, chapter 6, fusing the intuitive with the rational and achieving mastery. So this chapter is about how to actually gather the elements. So you have, as a master, let's say you've spent these 10,000 hours learning your skill. Let's say you're following your calling, you have this sense of destiny and you're persevering. And many times you would get a lot of insight as hunches, of intuitions. And it's very important for a master to actually connect these intuitive moments with rationale and to actually bring them into life. And here he gives example with one of my favorite writers, fiction writers, Marcel Proust. He's a writer of a novel called In Pursuit of the Lost Time. And this is a real masterwork. However, if you look at Marcel Proust's life, the whole idea and conception of the work took about 30 years. So about 30 years he spent in kind of being in the social circles of Paris. He was in a very rich environment. He knew all the celebrities of the day, but he wasn't producing anything meaningful. And he would procrastinate a lot. So in a way, like, this book was actually all the intuitions, all the subconscious things that were happening, the depression that he felt, that he had some kind of destiny, but he was not fulfilling it for some reason. So he poured all of these things, all these experiences that he had gathered over these 30 years into this wonderful book that changed literature, really. So this is an example where sometimes ideas need time to mature, and sometimes things that are your intuition could actually prove into something much larger than just hunches and hints and dreams. But you must have this sense of destiny, and Marcel Proust had this sense of destiny, and he turned his pain, his depression, and his sense of being unfulfilled into this wonderful book, which won a lot of fame for him and really put him in the history of literature. So this is all from me for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please comment. Let me know what else you want to see. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you with your new video next week.